As the journey toward Middle East peace advances, the courageous leadership and vision of the Prime Minister will become more clear to all the world, and they will serve not only the people of Israel, but all people in our generation and those who will inherit the earth.
The leader of Knesset and President Obama and all the distinguished leaders who have come from around the world. Yesterday, the Prime Minister did something that was unthinkable back in the dark ages when I was President of the United States. He sent out a tweet. And the tweet reminded us of a simple fact. It was Israel's first day without Shimon Peres.
And to the men and women of Christians United for Israel, this president hears you. This president stands with you. And I promise you that the day will come when President Donald Trump moves the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. It is not a question of if, it is only when.
Israel is not just our strongest ally in the region. As I've said for so many years, Israel is our most cherished ally in the world. Let the word go forth from Jerusalem, the eternal, undivided capital of the Jewish people and the Jewish state, that Donald Trump and I are proud to stand with Israel. Donald Trump and I stand with Israel because Israel's fight is our fight, because Israel's cause is our cause.
And the Israeli government says the Palestinian Authority is inciting this. Do you still want to stay neutral when the Palestinian Authority is inciting these attacks?
First of all, there's nobody on this stage that's more pro-Israel than I am. Okay? There's nobody. I am pro-Israel. I was the Grand Marshal not so long ago of the Israeli Day Parade down Fifth Avenue. I've made massive contributions to Israel. I have I have tremendous love for Israel. I happen to have a son-in-law and a daughter that are Jewish, okay? And 2 grandchildren that are Jewish. But I will tell you, I think if we're going to ever negotiate a peace settlement, which every Israeli wants, and I've spoken to the toughest and the sharpest, they all want peace, I think it would be much more helpful. I'm a negotiator. If I go in, I'll say I'm pro-Israel, and I've told that to everybody and anybody that would listen.
But something will happen when I become the president. As soon as I take office, I will begin the process of moving the United States ambassador to the city of Israel, as chosen as its capital. Your wife will be sorry, brother. Thank you.
and Jerusalem will remain the capital of Israel, and it must remain undivided. But any agreement with the Palestinian people must preserve Israel's identity as a Jewish state with secure, recognized, defensible borders. And Jerusalem will remain the capital of Israel, and it must remain undivided.
I continue to say that Jerusalem will be the capital of Israel, and I have said that before, and I will say it again.
Jerusalem is still the capital of Israel and must remain an undivided city, accessible to all.
Every previous American president refusing to move the U.S. Embassy to Jerusalem or to recognize Jerusalem as Israel's capital city. Therefore, I have determined that it is time to officially recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel.
Why do you think the removal of Saddam hasn't improved the lives of Iraqis? Or has it? I don't know.
Well, I think if you really want to know the truth about the invasion of Iraq, there's clearly some incentives for the invasion. Oil, securing oil was one of them. Establishing permanent military bases in the region was another one. But a far less talked about reality is Israeli plans, which made clear that the Balkanization of surrounding countries, in particular Iraq, if we go to Oded Yanan's plan for Israel in the 1980s, it lays out very clearly a strategy of destabilizing all of the surrounding areas of Israel. This includes Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Iraq, and even Egypt and Saudi Arabia. And this long-term goal is part of the Greater Israel Project. So in terms of the sectarian divide you see happening in Iraq today, it's actually all part of a very well-designed plan to try and secure the goal, this fantasy goal of the Greater Israel Project.
Okay, but why would Israel benefit from an unstable Middle East, an unstable Arab nations? Because what we see that this instability actually is followed by fundamental Islam. And people who are overthrown are either replaced by fundamentalist powers or there's just more sectarian violence that grows.
Yes, and it would seem on the surface from a sane point of view that everything is going wrong. But in fact, when you fracture a country along sectarian divide, ultimately you weaken the country. What the last thing that Israel or the United States wants is a strong Nasser-type leader, an Arab nationalist who will seriously ensure that the resources of that country are taken and protected and used for the benefit of the people. That's the last thing that the empire wants and that Israel wants. So while you have these religious fundamentalist nutcases who are running around bombing and doing all sorts of stuff like that, you have a weakened, fractured country in Iraq, and that is the prerequisite for ultimately expanding Israel into the fantasy of the Greater Israel Project. It doesn't seem sane, and it's not sane, because those who are trying to carry out these agendas are pure and simple psychopaths.
if you have an environment where everyone's playing by individualist rules and you come in working as a team, that you have a systematic advantage in that environment. The best way to prevent conflicts between different peoples, to the extent that that's possible, is for them to have their sovereign homelands. And lo and behold, Jews actually struggled for a very long time to create a sovereign Jewish homeland, namely Israel. It's very advantageous for them to have it both ways, right? They have their ethno-state, and they also live as a diaspora. Now, the ethno-state benefits from that because the diaspora is constantly meddling in the internal affairs of their host societies to support Israel. And that's especially true in the United States, where we have as many Jews living here as we have living in Israel, and where, you know, Israel gets billions of dollars every year in loans and just outright giveaways, and loans that'll never be paid back, so they're just giveaways anyway. And also where we're wasted trillions of dollars since 2003 in fighting wars in the Middle East that are dictated by Israeli strategic interests or strategic calculations. Jews are a distinct people, and they're loyal to one another, and that's all healthy and well and good. But if that's true, then we cannot give them citizenship in our societies and power in our societies and influence over our societies at the same time. And that is what the Jewish question is. The Jewish question really arose with the emancipation of Jewish communities in Europe. For a very long time, they were encapsulated, self-governing communities, and then they were quote-unquote emancipated by Napoleon. He was the great emancipator of Jewry. Well, as soon as they were emancipated and became citizens of the societies around them, it became a question. It was like, wait a second here. Not only are they citizens of our society and have all the rights of citizens in our society, but they're also, in fact, citizens of their own society, where they have their primary loyalty to other Jews all around the world, and even in our rival societies, even in our enemy societies, even in societies we're fighting wars against, right? Isn't there something weird about this? And isn't this an inherently unjust and disadvantageous relationship that we've instituted? And again, this goes back to the whole game theoretical issue. Just as a team strategy beats an individualistic strategy, right? You know, if you got somebody with dual citizenship, basically that dual citizenship is a way that their team, that a foreign team can plague you. They can hack your system. If you look at the history of Jewish intellectual movements and Jewish political involvement since Jewish emancipation, you see this all the time. And the neoconservatives are a beautiful example of this. The main sort of population of neoconservatives comes out of the Zionist wing of the Trotskyite movement. Bolshevism was largely a Jewish thing. Marx was a Jew, right? The core people who advanced Bolshevism were Jews, or part Jews, or married to Jews. It was a heavily Jewish phenomenon. The most ethnically conscious Jews ended up following Trotsky, and the most ethnically conscious Trotskyites became Zionists, and Zionist Trotskyites at a certain point defected, quote unquote, from the left to the right and became conservatives. And what did they do? Well, they colonized the Republican Party. Like cuckoos, they ejected the eggs and the hatchlings of real conservatives from the nest. They mopped it up pretty good, and they really destroyed a lot of the careers of actual non-Jewish, non-neocons. People like Joseph Sobran and Peter Brimlow and so forth were ejected, and then later on people like Ann Coulter, right? And the neocons took over the right in America. They're the ones who are pushing these catastrophic wars in the Middle East. And now that Trump has come along and they don't feel comfortable in the Republican Party, well, they're just reinventing themselves as Democrats, because Hillary Clinton's party has always been controlled in their foreign policy by the same faction. How do you make sure that American foreign policy is always pro-Jewish? You divide your camp and you colonize both the Republicans and the Democrats, so that, you know, no matter who's in power, they have a pro-Zionist foreign policy.
Israeli parliament has passed a contentious bill that defines the country as the nation-state of the Jewish people. The critics say it essentially diminishes the status of the country's Arab citizens. Let's get more now from Paula Salier. Controversial law, Paula. What are people saying about it?
Well, it certainly is controversial. We've seen a number of heated debates in the country's Knesset, the parliament, over the fact that this contentious nation-state bill has now been passed into law. Now, what this effectively means is that enshrined in Israel's basic law will be the idea that Israel is recognized as the historic homeland of the Jewish people and that they have exclusive right to national self-determination. Now, supporters of the bill say that it essentially equates Jewish values with democratic values, putting them on an equal footing. But critics, and there are several, if not many, they say that it effectively discriminates against the country's Arab population and other minorities. The bill also says that Jerusalem is the capital of Israel. It says that the official calendar is the Hebrew calendar, and it recognizes Jewish remembrance dates. It recognizes the Israeli version of Independence Day and Jewish holidays. Now, when it finally was passed in Knesset, it saw a lot of anger and reaction, particularly from Arab members of parliament who essentially ripped it to shreds. Take a look.
This is an evil law. A black flag hovers over it. This is a law over which hovers a black flag.
Now, the Israeli Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, by comparison, has said that this is a pivotal moment in the history of Zionism and in the history of the State of Israel. He says that this means that Israel has effectively now enshrined into law the basic principles of its existence.
This is a historic moment in the history of Zionism and the history of the State of Israel. Israel is the national state of the Jewish people. A national state that respects the rights of individuals, the rights of all its citizens. And in the Middle East, only Israel respects these rights. So today, we have written the law in stone.
Now, the bill was first proposed back in 2011, and over the years, controversial as it is, it has seen a number of rewrites and parallel proposals. The country's Prime Minister Netanyahu has always supported it, and for years he has vowed that eventually it will be passed into law, and that's what we've seen happening now with a lot of reaction.
Let me